Tens of thousands of people attended a memorial service for the slain conservative activist Charlie Kirk. In an emotional speech, his widow, Erika, forgave the 22-year-old man charged with killing her husband and said the only answer to hate is not to hate. But President Donald Trump accused what he called the radical left of political violence and praised Charlie Kirk as a great American hero. DW's Enos Pohl traveled to Phoenix, Arizona to find out whether Kirk's killing could serve as a moment of unity or ignite further violence.
Ever since Charlie Kirk was shot, the headquarters of his political organization, Turning Point, has become a pilgrimage site. Flowers, handwritten notes and balloons reflect the admiration Kirk receives, especially from young, conservative Americans. What made him so popular?
He was a vigorous fighter for freedom of speech and faith, and they wanted to silence him for it. So we'll keep it, we'll keep the good fight.
I can speak as somebody who just went through undergrad and law school, and I can tell you that for conservative kids in school in the United States, it's been really tough. A lot of times you feel like you can't stand up and say the things that you want to say, and Charlie was never afraid to do that.
Charlie Kirk was so vocal about God and about how he changed his life and how he can help everyone in every situation. And he helped all of us, I think, to be bold about our beliefs and our faith.
We talked to people from literally all over the United States, from Virginia, from Pennsylvania, from Missouri, even from upstate New York, who came here to Arizona to honor Charlie Kirk. Kirk was the co-founder of the organization Turning Point. The headquarters is right behind me, and a co-worker of this organization just told me that up to 70,000 new chapter requests were pouring in since Charlie Kirk was murdered. Tens of thousands got up in the middle of the night to secure a spot at Kirk's memorial service held in an arena in Phoenix, Arizona. Prominent religious and political figures attended the 8-hour-long event. And evangelicals were here too, a crucial voting bloc for the Republicans. What would the main message be? Would it be a moment of forgiveness or revenge?
What should be today's message? Oh, I think praise the Lord and, follow Charlie's original intent.
This is the time we just all need to come together and just create more peace and just be able to be open-minded.
Violence is never the answer.
Charlie Kirk's widow, Erika, had some words of compassion.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men just like the one who took his life. I forgive him.
President Trump offered a different view.
I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erika.
But didn't get a lot of applause for his remarks. The tone of the funeral of Charlie Kirk marked a sharp contrast to the rhetoric of the White House.
Unfortunately, we have the worst of us representing us in the media, but this country is a country of peaceful, loving people. Yes, we have guns, yes, we have violence, and we don't want that, of course, but I don't think it's the start of a new violent wave. I actually think it's the start of a new wave of peace and collaboration and hopefully working with our fellow Americans and the rest of the world.
We're joined now by U.S. expert Boris Vormann, director of the politics section at Bard College Berlin. His research focuses on U.S. politics, autocracy, and the decline of democracy. Boris, what was your impression of Charlie Kirk's memorial?
Well, that's a little bit difficult to judge here because it's so close. It's such an emotional event. At the same time, of course, it's a political event. And it was impressive to see Erika Kirk's speech and the way she was asking also for compassion and forgiveness, which I think is probably very difficult to do at that kind of moment. And we saw the kinds of contrasts that exist. So it's a very turbulent time in American democracy, and there's a great risk, of course, for this to be instrumentalized.
Trump described Kirk as a martyr for freedom. What role might Kirk's murder play for the MAGA movement?
This remains to be seen. I mean, this is speculation, of course. We don't know. Things that happen oftentimes after 2 or 3 weeks' time didn't quite cause the effect that people anticipate in these circles. But nonetheless, of course, he is trying to instrumentalize it. I think this much can be said after the speech that he gave. And it remains to be seen. Kirk had a huge following among young Americans, and of course, it's an emotional moment, and there's the political potential that, of course, some politicians see.
Since Kirk's murder, we have heard a lot from young people in the United States, many of them, of course, supporters of Charlie Kirk's. Give us some perspective. Is American youth really becoming more conservative?
Well, I think as a social scientist, I would have to say, let's look at the empirical data. Of course, he had a huge following on Instagram. He had 7 million followers on X, 5 million followers. There's a huge crowd that assembled yesterday, but these are, of course, glimpses. I think what we're seeing, if we're looking, for example, at the exit polls of the last couple of elections, Trump didn't make a huge difference for Trump over the last 8 years or so. 2016, he had about 37% of the youth vote. Same for the election against Joe Biden. A slight change last time around. So I think what we can see is a polarization of the youth, much as a polarization of the rest of American society. And we're seeing that the left in particular is split, especially on the question of Gaza and Palestine. And I think on the right, we're also seeing a shift towards the extreme right. So it's very difficult to discern a center, a political center, particularly among the youth.
Again, Trump followed Erika Kirk's message of forgiveness by saying, quote, "I hate my opponent." What do you imagine was his goal there?
We would have to ask him. I mean, he is trying to mobilize his supporters. I think what he's also doing, and he's been doing that with the hosts of different comedy shows, attacks on political opponents are something we've seen along the last couple of years of his presidency, also the first presidency. I think there is a real risk for American democracy to slide into an autocratic mode. And there's a risk of not allowing for an open political discourse, which ironically is exactly the opposite of much of what Charlie Kirk was standing for.
That is Boris Vormann. To you, we give you our deep thanks.
Thank you.
We're now joined by David Dunn, Professor for International Politics at the University of Birmingham in the UK. Professor Erika Kirk and Donald Trump. She was conciliatory. He said he hates his opponents. How do you explain this contrast?
Well, it's two different sides of the MAGA movement. A lot of the work that Kirk did was in galvanizing a reawakened spirituality and Christian nationalism as a large part of the Turning Point USA, whereas Trump and his cabinet and all his major acolytes were about exploiting this for political advantage. He thought he was being funny, but actually he was against the tone of what was a 3-hour meeting. More than half of it had a spiritual dimension. And so he was, in a sense, out of step with that, but he was also demonstrating what his political instincts are. Trump often says the quiet part out loud. He often says things suggesting that he's being ironic, being comic, but actually that's his real intent. But we did see Trump's true feelings on display here.
Now, Trump also described Kirk as a martyr for freedom. What role might Kirk's murder play for the wider MAGA movement?
Well, again, what we're seeing is the political exploitation of Kirk's death in particular. That framing as a martyr is being used for three things: as a rallying cry for youth, for a increased role of God in American politics. There is a exploitation of his death for further division, rather than doing what the governor of Utah did, Spencer Cox, and calling for unity. What you have in the words from Trump is a call for division and further hatred of your political enemies, almost giving the audience in the stadium and in America permission to hate and to have that, for that to be acceptable, for you to hate and to want the worst for your opponents. So there's a way in which it is being exploited. But there's also an irony here that Kirk was an advocate for reasonableness and for freedom of speech. And the MAGA movement want to use his death to actually be unreasonable and to crack down on free speech, onto what they regard as hate crime. And therefore we see this in the censoring of universities, of the censoring of media, and of firing of late night comedians who, if they even mention anything vaguely critical. And
now,
so
excuse me to interrupt you there, Professor, but we've hinted on this in our report from Ines Pohl earlier. But is it true, is my impression correct, that the American youth on the whole is becoming more conservative?
Yes, mostly, most previous elections in the post-war period, youths have voted Democrat. In the last election, presidential election, 45% of the youth voted for Trump. It's the highest rating of any youth vote in recent history. And that's partly as a consequence of this deliberate attempt by people like Kirk and other influencers through social media and through campus events to actually focus on that conservatism and link their Christianity to Republican values, and that is a feature of the American politics just now. Just for your listeners, one last point: we often think in Europe about Trump and Trumpism. The depth of support for Trump shows that actually the issue was with the way in which America is changing and American youth are changing, and therefore the move in that direction is more systemic than actually just one individual.
David Dunn there, Professor for International Politics at the University of Birmingham in the UK. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.